everybody. Welcome to Project HR, a podcast dedicated to building better workplaces. I'm Chris Craddock, and I'll be filling in for Beth Pilgreen. Now, until very recently, public relations and human resources operated as strictly standalone entities. PR for externally focused functions, and HR for internally focused ones. But like everything else in business today, thanks to digital technologies, that relationship is evolving, growing, and intersecting in so many new ways. Nick Kalm is the founder and president of Reputation Partners LLC, an integrated communications firm that provides a full range of in house PR, marketing, and strategic services. And he's going to help us understand how working in tandem can help HR and PR expand and enrich the company experience. Nick, we're glad you could join us.
Thank you, Chris. It's a pleasure to be here.
Fantastic. Well, let's start off with a question. How should human resource professionals work with their public relation counterparts?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I think it's an important one because very often, as you said in your intro, the two functions coexist and work alongside one another, but don't work very much in concert with one another. And what I've seen in the organizations that I've worked in, both as an employee and as a consultant over the past 30 years or so, it's when the two organizations work very much hand in hand that the organization benefits the most.
Great, great. Well, what should human resources and labor relations professionals expect from their public relations teams?
Well, I think it's several different things. One, certainly, and this would be of any other function within an organization, is going to be understanding some of the challenges that they face
Mhm.
and being responsive to be sure. But I think it goes beyond that. And there's certain aspects, certainly your listeners who are in the human resources or labor relations world, there's some unique aspects to those functions that it's incumbent, I believe, on the PR people who work in those companies or who work on the outside for those companies need to understand everything from a basic understanding of employment and labor law to the need for confidentiality and so
I
forth.
see, I see. And what are some of the frustrations you've heard from human resource professionals about public relations and who has the responsibility for fixing them?
Well, I mean, I think it's what I talked about earlier. Clearly, it's going to be, the function going off, public relations going off on its own and not really taking into consideration some of the challenges that HR folks have. That's a big area that needs to be top of mind for PR people. The whole employee experience, that's something that PR can obviously help magnify as well. The recruitment challenge, the retention challenge, so many of those things. It really comes down to a concern about a lack of understanding and appreciation for the challenges of the role.
Mhm. What would public relations like to see more of from their human resource colleagues?
Well, I would say, just from my own experience, a big part of that is there's often we find ourselves, if we're in public relations representing a company or we're in house at a company, we're called upon to provide some good data, some good information. What is the company's track record of promoting from within,
Mhm.
of promoting women, of people of color? How many, what are the employee satisfaction metrics that are available to the company? I lost track of how many times I've asked a client's HR team for data like that and not been able to get it in response. I think that's one of the key gaps
Mhm.
that really needs to be filled.
Yeah, I'm sure that's a challenge for sure. In a number of organizations, the public relations function reports to human resources. Do you think that that's a structure that makes sense today?
It does. I mean, and certainly public relations is one of those functions that can report any number of different places. I mean, I've seen it reporting into the CFO, I've seen it reporting into the general counsel. But absolutely, I think HR is a very good area for PR to report into, particularly to the extent to which the PR function includes employee communications. And again, there's a tremendous amount of alignment that should occur there between employee communications and HR. And if those are all part of the same department, it makes it a little bit easier to make sure that that alignment is achieved.
Hmm. Okay. What role does public relations play in employee recruitment and retention?
It's got to be huge. I mean, I think that's, I've seen HR organizations that just go off and go to job fairs and place ads and do some other things on social media and the other typical things that HR folks do to recruit. And then they ignore or don't focus on the important area that PR can really provide in terms of telling stories about uh, employees within the company, how the company promotes from within, how the company develops talent, and so forth. So it's
Mhm.
it's really a big opportunity that needs to be taken advantage of there, where PR can really help turbocharge and enhance the recruitment and retention piece.
I like that. Turbocharge it. That's good. So, in the introduction here, we talked a little bit about shifts and changes in both public relations and human resources being due to digital technology. Is that a fair assessment?
Absolutely. Well, certainly, I think in both, and I touched on it a little bit there in terms of how HR folks will use social media to try to help either showcase the employee experience, and then companies using things like Facebook and other platforms to show what a great place to work it is. Absolutely, social media and digital overall has taken on a much bigger role in both PR and HR. And one of the things though that we see and we try to help our clients see the importance of is don't get too far out over your skis and be so
Mhm.
reliant on digital that you lose that human touch and that face-to-face connection, which is really very powerful.
That's a good point. Yeah, everybody's got a computer in their pocket these days, but if you lose that face to face, you've lost a lot in terms of connection. Well, let's talk a little bit about the concept of company experience. Is it just another way of saying employer brand, or is there more to it?
Well, a lot of the things end up as part of employer brand because that does get into the recruitment and retention piece, but not necessarily everything within a company and within an employee's experience within that company is necessarily going to be proactively shared outside the organization. But
Mhm.
that's proactively, reactively, or just episodically, it might still happen. So, yeah, to a very large degree, they really are, I think, one and the same. Whatever an employee experiences, whether it's
Mhm.
something that the company wants them to remember and talk about externally or not, is certainly going to form the basis of some of that employee experience.
Well, why is the company experience so critical to an organization?
Because it's how what we were just talking about. It's the
Mhm.
recruitment and retention piece. What employees are experiencing. They're going to go out. They're going to tell their family members, their neighbors, their friends, all of that. I mean, you can have a company that does spends all kinds of money around advertising and recruitment, but if they aren't taking care of how their employees and prospective employees are
Mhm.
describing their interactions with or experience within the company, then it's really money that's wasted.
Yeah, yeah. You kind of want it to start to happen organically from having those company advocates.
Absolutely.
How important is it for the company experience to be consistent?
Yeah, I mean, I think, certainly you're going to have variabilities, any kind of, within different shifts at a plant, you're going to have a bit of a different experience depending on who's running that shift. Certainly within a company, different departments or different locations. But you want to be careful that it doesn't become too divergent because that ends up undermining really whatever the company is trying to achieve. If one part of the company is seen as very entrepreneurial and nimble and flexible, and another is seen as very, bureaucratic and
Mhm.
hidebound and maybe even punitive. That's going to really obviously be on sending a mixed message out there to the market from an employee recruitment and retention standpoint. It's going to do a lot to kind of undermine the company's reputation overall. Who are
Mhm.
these guys? What are they? What do they really represent? It's a muddled picture. You can certainly have something where it's more negatively consistent across the board. That's not good either. But if it looks like one organization to one set of audiences and something completely different to another, that's not going to be positive either.
Yeah, right. So consistency is very important there. Well, Nick, we're going to take a sponsorship break right now, but when we get back, we'll go into more detail about human resources and public relations and just how they can partner to improve the company experience. So stay with us.
Are you working to build an employee relations dream team? I've got an in depth guide that provides the same roadmap used by employers of choice across the country. It reveals the 3 functional areas you must address before you begin building your dream team, gives you detailed job descriptions, and key performance indicators that will make your team a trusted part of top management. Get inspired and meet the needs of your company with this masterful guide to building your employee relations dream team. Download it at unionproof.com/build an employee relations dream team.
We're back with Nick Kalm, founder and president of Reputation Partners. So, Nick, before the break, we were talking about the importance of the company experience being consistent. And that's where this partnership between public relations and human resources really shines, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I've seen organizations that have really struggled with some sort of an initiative that they're doing, and if there's a disconnect there, between what public relations is talking about and what human resources is talking about, anything having to do with the employee experience. It really becomes a problem if those two are not aligned. So, as we had talked about earlier, whether it's having them in the same department or making sure that the lines of communication are good, I mean, I would say perhaps second only to communications with the legal department. I would say communications between PR and HR are right up there among the most important for a company to have down pat.
Hmm. Well, what role does storytelling play in the building of this company experience?
It's huge. I mean, people really go off of and really rely on stories. They want to hear stories about their colleagues. They want to hear stories about the employee experience. So, being able to gather those stories, which again, folks in public relations, many of us started out in journalism, many of us have worked obviously with journalists. So, being able to capture and tell those stories is really important. And we can't do it alone. We need to be able to work with not only the people in the various departments, but HR, because HR is one of those functions where a lot of stories get heard and shared, whether it's by employees who have concerns or ideas or managers that are dealing with certain challenges. That partnership really becomes key, and finding out who those good stories are and where they are within the organization. That's something that HR is particularly well suited to be able to identify.
Mhm. I don't think I can share the name of this particular company, but I have seen several instances of really good Facebook company experiences where they're sharing anniversary dates, where they're sharing milestones within the company, and it gives this space where the employees can come together and talk about the things that they're proud of and share those with people out even outside the company. And so it helps build that.
Absolutely. Oh, there's no question about it. That's a big piece. And Facebook still, as much as it gets knocked for being, what your father or grandfather uses to look at pictures of the kids, it's still from an employee experience standpoint. That, along with YouTube, I would say, are probably the two primary social platforms that companies are using and should be using to really show what it's like. What is the culture like? How do you recognize people? What does the company do, have its employees do when they're having fun? What does that look like? And can people
Right.
inside or outside the company relate to that? Is that a place that I want to go and spend time at?
Let's talk a little bit about recruitment and the ways that human resources and public relations can work together to attract good talent.
Yeah, well, one of the ways, certainly, if a company is looking to go into a particular market or a particular school to try to recruit, it's a little bit. I hate to use the sort of the military analogy, but you basically want to soften up the battlefield, if you will, and you can do that through some very well timed stories that are placed in the local media in that market or at that university, talking about the company. You can do that again with social media, as we were just talking about, with some targeting, because it's going to be that much easier for HR to do its recruiting if there's some air cover, if you will, that's provided through PR and specifically through both earned media, meaning a nice positive story that's placed in either the newspaper or the broadcast news in that market, or through social media as well, because then the people that the company is trying to recruit are going to say, hey, I did see that article in the story, or I turned on the morning news and I saw the story about what you guys are doing, or I happened to be on my preferred social media platform and I saw this interesting story that you posted. When those things can work together and when PR does that kind of softening the ground, it just makes it that much easier for HR to accomplish their objectives.
Well, and that kind of covers some of the next question that I have here, which is how interconnected should these recruitment efforts be? For example, should public relations be leading on the communication elements of a careers website while the human resources group functions on, the functionality of it, or are both teams involved in all elements?
It really, I think, again, best practice is going to be it's a very synergistic, very cooperative, very iterative process that involves people from both communications or public relations and HR in the process. I think that's really going to be the key. It works best there. And obviously, certain departments are going to lead more on certain aspects than others. But if it is not happening in a silo, that's the key, is to make sure that everybody's got a seat at the table and everybody's got a voice.
Right. So let's talk about the job boards, Glassdoor company reviews, and all of that. Would a cooperative approach also work here to both address negative reviews and encourage positive ones?
Absolutely. And I tell you, I get calls about this all the time as well. Organizations that are struggling with negative Glassdoor reviews, or whether it's a large one or a small one. You got to be really careful with this, but it's amazing to me how many companies do not take seriously the opportunity that they have to help remind people that are happy. I mean, we live in everybody talks about it being a Yelp culture, which means people are likely to go onto platforms like Glassdoor when they're unhappy.
Hmm.
They're not, their natural inclination is not, to go on to a Yelp or a TripAdvisor or a Glassdoor or whatever when things are wonderful. So they need a little nudge. They need a little encouragement. And part of it is that positive storytelling we were talking about a moment ago. But part of it also is building up that base of positive reviews, asking people, not compelling them, not requiring them, not doing it in any kind of a punitive way. But if you've got folks who are happy in your organization, using PR and HR working together to encourage people to post positive sentiments is absolutely critical to be able to do that, because all it takes is one disgruntled employee or former employee who can go on there and post something that's particularly negative. If they don't see anything else there to counterbalance it, it can have a very seriously negative impact on the company's ability to recruit people.
And we mentioned Facebook before. I've also noticed lately, more so on LinkedIn, I've been seeing a lot of HR professionals posting positive things about, again, anniversaries, milestones, any community involvement that's been going on, along with photos and things like that, to kind of build up that positive energy.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because I mean, there are a lot of people who look at, again, you can look at Facebook, you can use LinkedIn. LinkedIn obviously has that sort of self promotional and career advancement vibe to it, but it is shifting as well, and including some more of that experience too. We try to tell, when we work with clients, we do try to tell them to kind of focus their energies on one versus the other. And I think from the employee experience standpoint, we still tell most of our clients to put most of their eggs into the Facebook basket.
Well, I'm guessing that benefits communication would also fall into these cooperative efforts as well, like boosting recruitment and retention.
Absolutely. And one of the challenges that we see a lot is, particularly in the benefits area, and this goes back to one of the questions, Chris, that you asked early on, in terms of what should HR people be looking for from PR, and what should PR be looking for from HR. But, there's a lot of very technical information that ends up being involved in benefits communications that's sort of second nature and an easy language for HR people. But most employees don't understand the various acronyms that they are being talked about: an HRA, from an FSA, to from a HIPAA to
Mm.
a RISA, and all of the whole alphabet soup. Which, again, a good PR person is going to at least be familiar what all of those things are. But
Right.
the ability for a communicator, a professional communicator like somebody in PR, to take some of that more technical, jargon-filled information about something that's as important to people as their benefits, second only to how they're paid, in terms of importance, and obviously some huge costs and implications there. Making sure that that partnership is critical there is so important, because that's how employees understand what's happening, what the changes are, what the choices are. So much of this is now wrapped up in choice, and making sure that you're coming up with the communications that help persuade employees to make informed choices. They can only do that if they can get past the jargon and the acronyms and everything else, and really understand what's at stake.
Well, can public relations also assist in other more traditional roles, HR areas like training?
Absolutely. And this is something else that we see a lot with our clients too. The whole concept of communications training. We see so often that there are folks who come out of the hourly employee ranks and get promoted to be in supervisory ranks, and they're expected to be able to communicate effectively with their direct reports. But they've never done that before. And they've come out of being in the hourly workforce, and they're like, how do I do that? These were my buddies, my peers last week, and now I'm their boss. How do I win them over? How do I exert influence? How do I
Mhm.
do active listening? All of those things. I think public relations can really help there, because that's a big part of what PR professionals do every day. And that's an area that I think enlightened companies really look at. Don't just throw people into supervisory or management roles without
Right.
giving them the tools and training to be able to be successful. And communications is one of those areas, obviously, that since PR people practice it every day, where we could be very helpful.
Yeah, leadership training is very crucial. And many times, just like you said, people are kind of thrown into those positions because they've been a good performer, but they really need the tools on how to talk and deal with people and how to build up their workforce.
Yep.
Well, Nick, it's time for a very quick break, but we'll be right back after this. You're listening to the Project HR podcast. I'm your fill in host, Chris Craddock, and our guest today is Nick Kalm, founder and president of Reputation Partners LLC. So, we've been talking about the ways that this collaborative approach between human resources and public relations can help with recruitment and training, with retention, and also with just keeping the company experience consistent. But it can also really be important in preparing and responding to crisis situations. Would that also be correct?
Oh, absolutely. There's obviously a lot of crisis situations that come up for an organization that have nothing to do with human resources function per se or employees. But in terms of responding to any kind of a crisis, it's obviously going to involve the company's employees in some way, shape, or form as well. So that partnership really becomes critical. Where it becomes especially intense, though, is if it relates to something that happened within the company that is something that HR would naturally be involved with anyway, whether it's some sort of a sexual harassment or racial discrimination issue or a unionization issue or difficult restructuring or downsizing. Any of those areas exist. When those exist, it's important for the public relations function to be joined at the hip with HR. And again, the more sensitive some of those issues get, the more critical it is that that partnership be in place.
And crisis management, along with public relations, marketing, and a whole host of other strategic services, are what your company, Reputation Partners, provides to its customers. So tell me a little bit about your company.
Yeah, no, thank you, Chris. It's been fun. I started it about almost 18 years ago. Prior to that, I was worked at a couple of very large multinational public relations firms, and then a couple of multinational pharmaceutical and chemical companies for about 11 years before that. But I really decided to set this up and start this company because I saw that there was a real opportunity, really not only here in the Midwest where we're based, but across the country for a strategic communications firm to work very closely with HR and other functions within companies, both large and small, in terms of helping them achieve their business objectives. And again, as you can appreciate with the name Reputation Partners, everything we do has to do with reputation. It's either protecting it if there's a crisis that's either unfolding or about to unfold, rebuilding it if they've just gone through some sort of a significant negative or challenging event, and then enhancing it in good times as well. Not only the company's reputation, but its leadership's reputation as well. And we do that in a variety of different ways, both through earned media relations, as we talked about earlier, crisis planning, helping around the whole employer brand piece and employee experience, communicating about benefits and other changes and the like, and then more from that in terms of even including other related marketing services like websites and the like.
Well, Nick, you sound really passionate about this, so I'm kind of glad you're at the helm of that company.
Thank you.
One of your stated specialties is labor communications. Is that a common skill among PR firms?
No, it's actually very unusual. It's one of the reasons why I got into it because I thought there was a real opportunity there. And communicating around and with labor unions is one of the bigger challenges out there because, frankly, they're very good at communicating. And it forces companies and consultants like us who work with them to be particularly on their game. But a lot of the principles there apply to all kinds of communications involving employees as well. It's avoiding jargon, it's speaking in very simple and compelling hearts and minds winning kinds of messages. And that, again, the specialties there and some of the peculiarities of dealing within the National Labor Relations Act and the Railway Labor Act are ones that very few communications organizations out there have.
Is outsourcing public relations a common practice?
It is. And, it's typically, a lot of very, very large companies will have a good size in-house public relations staff and then still bring in an outside PR firm. And we've certainly worked with a number of those very large organizations as well. But a lot of what I would call the middle market companies that are, doing revenue from, say, 500 million up to maybe $2 or $3 billion a year in revenues. They also have needs for public relations firms, and some of it is of an ongoing nature, and then others are really around specific issues or challenges. And that's where we've found a lot of the work that we've had the opportunity to do coming from.
Great. Well, and with your specialty also being in labor communications, I'm sure there are many PR firms that are internal that may not have that special ability. So reaching out to a company like yours is probably very important for them to have that resource.
I think so.
Well, what are the benefits of hiring an outside agency for public relations?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a couple of different things. I mean, one is obviously since we're working outside of an organization, we get the perspective of working with multiple different companies within a particular industry or multiple different industries. And a lot of folks, and again, nothing against it. I worked in-house in a couple of different companies for almost 12 years of my career. There's nothing that replaces that in terms of really getting steeped inside a company's culture and operations than being in-house. But sometimes it really benefits you to have that outside in perspective. Sometimes it's really nothing more than a consultant coming in and saying what the internal public relations people have been saying all along, but because it's a consultant who's charging a few $100s an hour or more is saying it, suddenly the CEO and others perk up and listen to it a little bit more than when their own in-house person says it. And that's not necessarily a great thing, but it's also a reality. So you get that kind of worldly view that you get from being out and being a consultant and working with many different organizations, often about the same issues.
hmm Well, and earlier we were talking about building that collaborative team with HR. Is that still possible with an outside agency rather than an in-house team?
Oh, absolutely. You know, a lot of our clients and the work that we do are the HR people. Certainly, if there's a communications or PR function within a company, we work with them too. But a lot of the work that we do around change management, around benefits communications, around restructuring and reorganization, our primary point of contact is very often the chief human resources officer or his or her direct reports.
I see. Okay. Well, Nick, this has been great. Can you tell us how our listeners can learn more about Reputation Partners?
Sure. So we're on the web, reputationpartners.com. Pretty simple there. You can also find us on LinkedIn and on Facebook and other platforms like that. And I'm on Twitter as @Nick Kalm. So I would love to connect with your listeners. And certainly I'm always happy to talk about these issues and help organizations with their challenges. And it is, as you said earlier, a passion of mine. And I really enjoy what I'm able to do.
Great. And as always, that information will be included in this episode's companion guide as well. So don't forget to sign up for it at projectionsinc.com/podcast. But we're not done with the interview quite yet, Nick, because it's time for what we call our lightning round questions. These are questions that we ask every guest on the podcast, and I hope you're ready.
I'm ready.
Okay, first question. Topic showdown. In this episode, we discussed public relations. Keeping to that public theme, in your opinion, which of these public behaviors is worse? People talking loudly on their phones or spitting on the sidewalk?
Oof, that's a tough one. I'd say they're both bad, but I would say that the talking loudly on their phones in public, I see a heck of a lot more than spitting on the sidewalk. So I'm going to go with the talking loudly on their phones because it just happens so much more often and really needs to stop.
I would have to agree. And often I think these people are talking to me, and then I look
Yeah,
and they've got that slab of, metal in their hand.
absolutely.
Well, what's the worst job interview question that you've ever been asked?
Well, I'd have to say there that probably the worst job interview question I've ever been asked was when I had an interview way back when, and this was when I was young and full of, whatever. And the question I was posed was essentially along the lines of, we want somebody who can do A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, like this impossible list of tasks. And I can't say that I handled it all that terribly well because my response to them, and it didn't endear me to the recruiter who set me up on the interview, it was with a very prominent credit card company. And I basically said, well, if you find somebody who has all those qualifications, you should hire them.
Well, did you get that job?
No, I did not. I did not.
All right, here's the next question. What's your favorite thing about working in public relations?
Well, I'd say we get an opportunity to work with so many different organizations and people at various levels within organizations as well, from the people who are working on the shop floor all the way up to the C-suite. I love that, and the different industries. And it's all about, everybody is forming opinions about reputation and about image and everything else. So if you can have a hand in shaping that and maybe pointing to it with some folks and having them see what you've done, if it's something that happened to be out in the media, although often a lot of what we do in the crisis world is keeping it from the public eye and handling it that way.
Well, what's the best piece of advice that you've ever been given?
Well, I'd have to say for me, because again, I did go ahead and start my own firm, was to go out and start my own firm. I had worked in these large organizations for 20 years of my career, but I had that entrepreneurial itch that needed to be scratched. And I, waited and waited. And then finally I looked at where I was in my career and I said, look, if I don't do this now, I may never do it. So I listened to that voice that was rattling around in my head and that people were telling me from outside, and I have not looked back.
Well, and the final question, who or what inspires you?
You know what? It's the people who get up every day and go to work and do their jobs, whether it's a glamorous job or it's a necessary job, whatever it might be, the people who are motivated to put food on the table, provide for their families, and work hard. I mean, that's one of the things I value most is hard work.
Mm-hmm.
So when I see someone else doing it, I really admire that.
I agree. Thanks for joining me today on this week's episode of Project HR, Nick.
Thank you, Chris. It's been a pleasure for me as well. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
And as always, thanks to our listeners as well. And again, don't forget to grab the companion for this episode at projectionsinc.com/podcast. And if you'd like to be on Project HR or know someone who would, feel free to email us at projecthr@projectionsinc.com. As always, we'd love you to rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you get your content. And we're keeping an eye out for more reviews, so don't hesitate to leave us some feedback. And that's it from me for now, so let's make it a great day at work.